Hi TBM, this is our first conversation with you. We're really happy to be here this evening with Dr. Amanda Gabrielle Jones.
Yeah, Dr. Amanda
Gabrielle Jones.
Yeah,
Yes.
Feminize my name, please. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, I keep thinking that Gabrielle is the last name, but Gabrielle is actually a middle name, guys.
Yes.
So Dr. Amanda Gabrielle Jones.
Thank you so much, Margaret.
And we're going to have a little, conversation, which will be in snippets because I want us to be able to get directly to certain points that will be relevant to what we're doing in TBM. So you can click and get directly to the information that you need. And so that Jackson does not disturb you all, I am going to say bye-bye while I ask questions of Dr. Amanda Gabrielle Jones. As I said, we are really privileged to have her in TBM, first off. She's a medical doctor, and she also has her own business, a wellness education business, and we're very excited to hear what that is all about and how she made that decision. And so we'll start with the career and entrepreneurship angle.
Well,
yeah?
First of all, Margaret, I want to say that I feel privileged to be part of TBM, and I'm really glad that you added me because, on Facebook, everybody's out there saying something, and what was really exciting for me is to find a group of people who actually are interested in the same things that I'm interested in and the information that I want to share. And, it's a place where I'm finding a lot of like-minded people. So.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
The space was created, and we just have these wonderful people coming on.
Yes.
And my life has been completely enriched.
Yes.
By the people we
Yes. I'm excited about it. I'm excited about connecting and, gradually growing and getting to know the people on TBM and, what they have to offer, what they have to share, what they're going through. It's a very exciting, close-up journey.
Yeah. So what I want to do with this segment is I want to focus on career and entrepreneurship first, because I think one of the things that's really interesting, fascinating about your life is you are a qualified doctor, you're working in your traditional, in the traditional career path for a doctor in the hospital and you just make the decision at some point, I don't know what caused it or what, but you made the decision, you are now an entrepreneur.
Well,
and I'm just, what caused that transition?
It really was a very, very gradual process. Now, I first want to bear in mind that a lot of doctors are entrepreneurs, whether or not they work within the system. A lot of doctors are entrepreneurs.
Their own practice.
Yeah. Or sometimes they're part of a system, working with other doctors.
Yeah.
So I don't think that entrepreneurship and the work of a doctor are necessarily so separate.
Well, I do think, I would say that I do think there's a difference. Because as a lawyer as well, many lawyers set up their own practice. I'm not certain I would, categorize that as entrepreneurship. I see that as the practice of your profession. Even though you are self-employed.
Right. So we're going back to the meaning of the word entrepreneur, the roots of it, to undertake something. So in that sense, I definitely am an entrepreneur because the whole vision I have for my wellness workshops and going into this field really is, I wouldn't say something brand new, but it is something that the majority of my colleagues would not take it upon themselves to do because it really is off the beaten path. So from that point of view, yes, I would agree with you. It is entrepreneurship.
And later on, we'll get into exactly what you do.
Yeah.
But what challenges have you faced in being an entrepreneur in Trinidad and Tobago? Have you faced any challenges, and if so, what?
Actually, I feel that the challenges for me haven't been external. First of all, my initial foray into business was working with other people, either as part of a partnership or helping other people get started with their business. And I wasn't basically the business owner.
Right.
Or the sole, the main, the managing director. Yeah. Yes, I am. So that's a shift. I can't say that I felt that I faced any remarkable challenges beyond what you would expect.
What would we expect? Because some of our TBMers may be interested in making the change from being a salaried employee or so
Right.
to,
Well, I mean,
owning their own business.
there's risk, there's
Right.
uncertainty, there's hard work, there's being new out there and people not knowing who you are.
Would you say sometimes it's harder work as an entrepreneur?
Oh, definitely, because you don't necessarily have public holidays. For example, I worked on Christmas Day, I worked on Christmas Eve, I worked on Old Year's, I worked straight through Carnival. It's not that I had planned to, I had said, okay, I really want to back off and clean the house, do some gardening, have some family time. I did have other plans, but the work was calling. You have your self-imposed deadlines and you really want to make those deadlines.
That's interesting.
Yes.
You said you worked on those holidays and you have these self-imposed deadlines. What do you think is the key to your drive? What motivates you to do that for your business, but not for your... But let's say we wouldn't do that for a salaried position.
I think the nature of the salaried position is that you have expectations of time off. So that is actually part of the contract, part of the concept, part of what you're going in there with when you take a job. But the opposite is true. When you are building a business, it really is up to you. Even if you're going to be delegating some tasks, it's up to you to decide who you're delegating it to, what are the terms and conditions. When you're into having your own business, it's up to you. So that I think the drive is the knowledge that if you don't do it, it's not going to happen.
That's right.
That's right. And it's not a situation where you can sit back and get paid, and even if you're slacking off or not there half the time, it's a situation where if the business is going to work, you have to make it work, and you have to do the work, and you have to present something worth being paid for, and that's a big part of it. They say in business.
Value.
Right, you get paid for value.
That's
so if you
right.
want to know what is your value to the marketplace, business is the place to find out. You can get paid for doing very little out there in the world of employment.
True. And where would you say passion comes in? Does passion have a place? Passion for what you're doing?
I would say passion is everything, because when the passion isn't there, I mean, I've seen people trying to create a business because they have interest but not passion. They can see how it can work, but they don't have the passion. And because they don't have the passion, they don't put in the 100% or the 200% they need to put in. And it just falls by the wayside and they say, it didn't work. Well,
why do you think?
But you should have chosen something that you were more excited about.
Your passion.
Sometimes you build it, but it's if the passion isn't there, you can do the work, but then it becomes a burden. The business becomes a burden for you, and
in fact, I think that's really insightful.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I try to tell people as well is that find your passion, and everything else will fall in line. And one of the questions I repeatedly get is, well, Margaret, how do I know what my passion is? How do I find my passion? I don't know if you have any, insight as to how you found yours or how someone could find it.
I love it that you asked that question, because on really reflecting on how I ended up here as opposed to the typical career pathway, because I had decided, that I would go into primary care and I would do a general practice or a family medicine degree, and it was just a question of would I do it in England, would I do it in Trinidad, and somewhere along the line, around that time, I got distracted by the world of business. And during this time, I went to a seminar, and it was Mr. Philip Rochford. That's
I know him.
You know him? Yeah, he's an awesome senior gentleman,
Yes.
very active mentally, much more so than younger people. I'm sure he's in his 70s already. Mr. Rochford did a session for us on basically finding your passion. And it was at that session that I thought it through and put it into words for the first time. And I realized that, one of the things about finding your passion, what you're passionate about is something that you are willing to do naturally, and you do it so naturally that you can do it for free and be happy.
You find social media.
And you find yourself in flow.
Me and TBM.
Wow. So flow is when your work is flowing and you're caught up in it and the energy is there and there's no regret and there's no stress and there's no strain. It's a kind of positive stress in that you're busy, you're active, you're fully engaged.
That's right.
And I had learned by that time enough about myself simply because I hadn't been in a rush to pigeonhole myself into anybody else's expectations.
Right.
And I've always been a person to pay attention to who I am.
So how long after you qualified as a medical doctor did you make the decision? Well, did you gradually see yourself moving away from the cut and thrust of everyday practice?
I'll give you the story as briefly as I can. By the time I was finished my internship, I had been trying to figure out what to specialize in. And I worked as a regular medical practitioner, both in accident and emergency, and as a primary care physician for about 6 years in all, before I went into business. And it was during that time that I did a lot of finding myself. I was learning that I had skills I didn't know I had. And I was...
Like what?
Well, for instance, I always knew that I loved to write, but even though I'd enjoyed doing some public speaking when I was in the health centers, meaning, you know, doing the health lectures for the patients on mornings. That was one of the things that I was able to develop in the world of business. The ability to do a public presentation and really enjoy it. And then notice that the people listening to me are enjoying it too. And I know that not everyone can do that. I sometimes speak to my colleagues and ask them, okay, would you be willing to do a presentation on this particular topic? And there's always, I shouldn't say there's always, but for many of them, they're brilliant physicians, but that's not something that they're comfortable with. It's not something that they're called to do. And I realize it's not something that everyone else can do.
That's right.
What also occurred is that very gradually I realized that what I wanted to do most, I couldn't do within the system as the system existed currently, and that's to help revolutionize people's health and having the freedom to do so without the constraints of protocols and systems that are imposed on me from either government or another business. And these constraints might basically be 10 years outdated. I'm not making any accusations here. I'm just saying that sometimes the protocols can be behind the research.
Right.
So by being on my own, it gives me the independence, and independence is very important to me, to be able to teach and preach what I believe is in the best interest of the people who are, you know, working with me.
Okay, that's great stuff.
Yeah.
One last thing I want to ask you about career and entrepreneurship. If you were to, if you were asked to pick out the 3 most important things that, one needs to be successful in business,
what would those be?
What would those be?
I think there's so many. We're often asked to pick out 3 because you can never list all. Well, I would say passion. Passion is definitely one. But if you're passionate about a lot of things, and some people are, you still have to be able to focus and hold that vision. So you've got passion, you've got focus, and
you said hold that vision.
Hold the vision.
It's really vision, passion, and focus.
Yes, but I'm going to throw in another one, and that's integrity.
Nice.
Because if you play with your integrity, somewhere along the line, it's going to catch up with you. And when your reputation goes,
thank you.
We all want to deal. Okay, there's this talk about businesses being unethical and dishonest, and corporations being unethical, and politicians being unethical. The truth is, even though we have these concerns about this being the case in the society, that's not what we want. That's not what we want to deal with. And I think when people find a businessman or a politician who they believe has integrity, man,
it goes a long way.
It goes a long way. It goes a long way. That's the person you want to deal with. You want to deal with someone who's honest. So I would say that would be.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Dr.
Thanks for allowing me to share some of my thoughts and my experiences. I appreciate the opportunity.